Welcome everyone to Meditation Mount. It's wonderful to have you join with us today. We're gathered from various parts of the world. And let's begin as we normally do by weaving together the matrix of our communion, creating our community of the heart. So let's begin by becoming aware of our breath. Allowing the long, deep, slow, rhythmic breathing to bring ourselves into a state of stillness. Our physical body relaxed. Our emotions calm. Our mind serene. And then we stand in the silent space of the heart and feel the presence that is the fire of love, that eternal flame. And we connect heart to heart to heart to heart. And we visualize lines of lighted love weaving together our many hearts. And we stand as a community in communion. And time and distance vanish, and we stand together as one inside this group heart. So let us bring ourselves back out of that deep silent place together and begin our journey today. The theme that we will be exploring is called Cycles and Seasons, Tracking the Soul's Journey on Earth. And this afternoon here at Meditation Mount, this theme was greatly amplified because there was a celebration of life for a friend of the Mount, a person who died at age 64, still with much to give, but still with much already given. And 100 people came together to celebrate, shed tears of joy, tears of sorrow, and to celebrate the cyclical nature of life. So it seems that this theme today carries some real meaning for me in my heart. I was asked to officiate at this celebration, and what I got in touch with was just the commitment, the effort, the focus, the passion that it takes to bring the soul into focus, to carry out its destiny, to carry out its work, and to become, together with others, a force for good in the world. And this particular person was a force for good in the world. And even though their form is no longer present, their spirit and work live on. And so what I'd like to do today is to go through a journey with you, and I'll explain some of the images we're going to be using. I thought it'd be better if I showed some pictures, told some stories, read some prose. And the images I'll be drawing upon were created back in 1975 when I lived in the Findhorn Foundation, the Findhorn community in northeast Scotland. They're part of a 3-month esoteric philosophy course. And so I just selected these because they're very simple, very childlike, and it will be easy to tell a story. Because what I don't want is to try and teach a session on the ageless wisdom. What I'd love to do is to deepen my understanding of what we're a part of. What does it mean to be a soul on earth? How did this come about? Why? And so I thought we could start by taking a look at the big picture. And the big picture is the process whereby consciousness emerges and self-awareness leading to self-realization occurs. So our first image is the big picture. So here you see in the top left of the screen, there's a circle. It's not a complete circle, it's made up of broken lines. It's called the I am. And I call this birth one, the state of unmanifest consciousness. It's that state of consciousness that sort of senses itself but doesn't really know itself because it hasn't realized itself. It hasn't lived itself yet. So this is, if you like, an amorphous sense of oneness. And my understanding of the journey is that from the I am, we move into a process whereby we become the I am that, and we enter a phase called birth two. So birth one is this wholeness, unrealized wholeness. And if you go back to the Bhagavad Gita, you can take that timeless phrase from the Bhagavad Gita and apply it to this image. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, yet I remain. So pervading the universe with a fragment of myself, it's though the one in its I am state fractured itself into a billion pieces and entered time and space. And that's really the story of our journey of self-awareness and consciousness as the soul. And we dwell for a long time in the I am that. And we are part of what I would call the dismembered body of oneness. We've forgotten that we belong to one unified field of consciousness. And this is where we find ourselves for many lifetimes. I believe this is where we find ourselves as a civilization at the moment, not realizing our true heritage, our true destiny, our true promise. And yet there's a deep call from not just the individual soul, but the soul of humanity and the soul of the earth to put the members back together, to literally remember who we are. So in this move from birth two to birth three, we are consciously remembering. And so the stage that we call I am that I am, that is born out of I am that, is now a realized oneness that existed in the first stage of I am as an unrealized oneness. I know this is fairly simplistic, but I wanted to offer this because it explains why sometimes we feel so cut off and yet at the same time have this deep sense of belonging to something greater, something deeper. So this is, if you like, the big picture that we're going to begin with. So let's have a look, before we go into the birth of the soul and trace that back 18 million years, so the ageless wisdom teaching tells us, let's look again at some of the high-level principles involved of this. So what are the dynamics involved in manifestation, in revelation? And this next image will give us a picture. So there at the bottom is the quote I just gave from the Bhagavad Gita, having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, yet I remain. So this is God transcendent, the God that exists all the time, everywhere, omnipresent. And the God that lives buried in every aspect of creation that is the God immanent. So when we talk about the story of Earth and the birth of light on Earth, the birth of consciousness on Earth, we're talking about the awakening of the light that is buried in matter, the awakening of the light that is crucified in form. This is the dormant divinity of who we are. And then the whole of creation and the revelation of this is that dynamic dance between God transcendent and God immanent. So let's unpack this a little more, and we can go deeper into these three births before we step back and tell the story of the birth of the soul itself. So birth one. So birth one is when the divine seed has been placed within the womb of darkness. It's crucified in matter. The light disappears inside the darkness. It's not the tomb. It's the darkness of the womb. But the light doesn't know itself yet. So inside this state of being, it's held by the darkness. It's held by the mother. It's held. And then it begins to sense this state of oneness. But it's an amorphous oneness. It really is akin to the story in the Bible of the Garden of Eden, where everything was paradise. There was no separation. And then something happened. We know the story of Eden. Birth two happened. So in the Garden of Eden, we're told that Eve offered Adam an apple. We're also told that in the Eastern tradition, it was a pomegranate, because a pomegranate is a whole sphere containing many, many seeds. So it's like the Bhagavad Gita, having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, having got all these seeds inside me, I remain as the pomegranate. Anyway, we're told that Eve offered Adam and invited him to taste of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Not of good and evil, but the knowledge of good and evil, or the knowledge of duality. So this is where consciousness moved from this amorphous at oneness, like a state of Eden, and then we knew separation. Masculine, feminine became evident as polar expressions in different bodies. So this is a time when something is stirring inside. The fire that generates the awareness at this level of consciousness is the basic fire of matter, which is called fire by friction. It's like rubbing your hands together, banging the rocks together to create a spark. This is the basic fire of awareness. And this is the expulsion of humanity from the Garden of Eden. Not because we did anything wrong, but we suddenly had eaten of the tree of the knowledge of duality, and we left our oneness behind, and we associated with that and this and that and this, and I am that. So what happens next? Because we're in this transition between birth two and birth three. There comes a time when the light that's been buried and crucified in matter, in our personality, starts to grow and knock on the door, where the soul is calling it forth. It wants to meet itself on earth, a homecoming. God transcendent, God immanent are calling to each other. And then they meet. And suddenly They merge and become one, and the I am that then descended into the I am that becomes the I am that I am, which is a state of oneness that knows itself to be at one with itself. So this is still big picture. This is still big picture, and I want to keep it at this level because we're going to dive into, so what does it mean to incarnate on earth? But I wanted to present at a high level these 3 stages of birth. So how about a story? But before the story, let me just say, this is something I was reminded at during the celebration of life this afternoon at the Mount. Life is eternal, while its myriad forms of expression are temporal. Nothing that's born will remain. It eventually, when its cycle is complete, will die. It will be recycled. And what we're learning to dance with are the seasons of life, the cycles of life. And if you look at the big macro picture, you can say that one season in the life of the planet would be the birth of a civilization. That's a lifetime. Or you can look at us as individuals, whether it's 60, 70, 80, 20, whatever the number of years associated with a lifetime are, that's a cycle. And often we lose sight of this greater rhythm and purpose, and we get caught up in the time-bound reality of daily personal life. So my sense is that as we stand in these precarious times when outer and external sources of security are not to be found anymore, we need to turn into the only secure thing that we know is that life is present in us, God immanent. And here at Meditation Mount, we call that the principle of essential divinity. Within each of us and within each of creation, there lives the spark of the Creator. Each of us is a fractal of the one life. So let's take a look at what does it mean to be human. So here's one definition. There could be many ways of doing it, but this is back in 1975. This is the best I could come up with. A human being can be defined as a state of consciousness that has an inner and outer reality, a subjective and objective relationship with life. And this veiled consciousness allows the development of personal understanding and self-awareness through the use of free will. We can be anything and anyone and do anything that we wish until we realize, but who am I? And something deep is calling us to be ourselves. Well, who am I? And we go on this journey. And gradually the pressure builds. And we start to see cracks in our personal life that's held together by who we think we are. And then inside of us, the soul is exerting this pressure, sounding this note of who we truly are. And at some point, when the note of the soul is strong enough, when we've said yes to life, things start to crack apart. So let me leave the images here for a moment and see if I can recall the story. So it's once upon a time, as all good stories begin, once upon a time, 18 million years ago, the planetary being decided that it wanted to be more self-aware. It needed a level of consciousness that could enter the depths of time and space and matter and discover itself. It needed a representative of itself. At that time, so we're told, Animal Man was around. Animal man at that point didn't have a higher awareness. The fire of Prometheus had yet to descend. So the decision was, inside the human will be the first time that these three aspects of life, spirit, soul, and matter, would come together in one package. So we as human beings are the three in one. We're a fractal of the planetary being. Now, the task at that time was, how do you bring the fire of heaven and put it in a body that's not really able to receive that high fire? Because our animal human consciousness at that time wasn't the right fireplace. And so here's what the story tells us. A group of beings associated with the chain of Venus said, we can help. If you want a fireplace that will house the fire of heaven, the fire of spirit, we can give you the materials that you can create your fireplace. Now, this is a group of angels or devas called the Manasa devas. They were the devas of pure mind, so the story goes. So they had perfected a level of consciousness of pure mind that could handle the highest fire. And so the gift of these beings, it was said, they gave of the substance of their being, and the cloth of our soul was woven from the threads of their being. I mean, I'm not going to give you the technical how it was done. If you go to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, it's like a technical manual. They can tell you how the thing was woven together and the engineering plans, etc., etc. I want to share the story that touches my heart, because here is a birthday present to infant humanity. So now we've got this fabric woven together of angelic substance. So inside of us, we've got spirit, we've got fire, we've got the angelic substance, we've got the fire of mind, the fire of Prometheus, we've got all the realms that have come up through evolution of the minerals and the plants and the animals. Suddenly, inside the human being, we have this complete package. But the package doesn't know who it is. And so, in the wisdom of the Creator, it said, well, free will. And we trust that the call of life will eventually get through, so that that free will, after we've done everything we think we want to do, we find ourselves being called to do the thing, the only thing that we can do, which is respond to the deep call of life within us. And so that's the story of how life on Earth was born 18 million years ago. It's called the process of individualization. It's when inside the human realm, it all came together. And it's interesting because the number 4 is always the bridge between the higher 3 and the lower 3. And by higher and lower, I don't mean in a judgmental way, but vibratory way. So here we have our human nature being this incredible opportunity to bridge heaven and earth through the power of our creative mind, through the power of our imagination, to tune in to the deep desire and dream of the planetary being and formulate that, to give it form, to give it shape. So that, in a nutshell, is the big story of how we came to be born. And so the soul's journey on earth is really the journey of revelation, because at one level, this oneness exists, but it has to be revealed in time and space. So how is it revealed? It's revealed cyclically. So let's have a look at an image that may give us a clue as to how that happens. So here On the upper part, I've called that the causal level, the level of the soul, the level of the unmanifest, the level of the deep desire of life to be. And it needs to enter the fields of time and space because that's where the sowing and the growing take place. And so it enters through the portal of life. We're born. I call this a white hole because light enters into time and space. When we're born, we come as light-filled packages, and it takes us several lifetimes to reveal that light and to shine that light and to be that light in the world. And then, just as in nature, when something has completed its cycle, it goes back through the portal of death, is reintegrated, the forms are composted, the forms are recycled, and the spirit that has occupied those forms returns to the causal level, the formless level, a whole season, a whole lifetime wiser. And then it's said, in consultation, the soul, the lords of karma, all the faculty in classroom earth figure out, okay, so next time around, what lessons do you need to learn? What gifts can you give? And they draw up a lesson plan. And then, so the story goes, we're attracted to a set of parents. And at the right time, at the appointed time, we line up with them. We commit to being reborn. And we enter the fields of time and space. And we end up being born through a mother in this small package. And it takes years to realize that I am not the small package. I am the soul revealing itself through the evolution of form, through the growth of form. So I want to just give this sense of cycles and seasons and have a look at the next image before we step back again. So the next image will talk about the soul and personality relationships. And this sphere I've used as the sphere of possibility, the sphere of expression. But inside the sphere, we have that divine spark. We have our essential divinity. And inside of that, we have the spiritual self that is seeking to incarnate. And without getting too technical, when we are incarnated on earth, just as we are now, there is this double thread between our spiritual nature and our earthly nature. It says the thread of consciousness and the life thread. So let's explore that and give it some very down-to-earth meaning. So the consciousness thread means that we're aware. So what happens each night when we lay down and go to sleep? The consciousness thread is released and we go to other realms. We go to dreams. We go wherever we roam and whatever's part of our curriculum. Now the life thread remains intact, otherwise we die. And this we do, day after day, night after night. Now when we complete a lifetime, something else happens. Not only is the thread of consciousness cut or separated from the personality, but now the life thread is untethered. And life withdraws back into the formless realm beyond the veil. And the form that we sort of drove around in, the vehicle that I call Michael this time around, has served its purpose. I've learnt my lessons. I've been able to give whatever gifts I've been able to give. And I bring with me the harvest of the earth. So when we talk about a celebration of life, the one that many of us witnessed this afternoon, it's a harvest time. So after each incarnation, we go through a process of harvesting, reviewing. And I think many of us remember from school that we just didn't go to school for 1 year and learn it all, know it all. It took many years. If you go to university and take a degree, it takes several years. Well, then, in a similar manner, it takes many lifetimes to unfold the wisdom, to unfold the truth, the goodness, and the beauty that lives inside each one of us. And without getting into numbers, there are some traditions that say we have hundreds of incarnations or thousands of incarnations. Just as in a garden, you'd have many seasons of growth to mature that which is on the inside, so that when it grows, it fully displays the splendor on the outside that lives on the inside. So there are a number of people who say, well, I don't believe in reincarnation. I'm not here to convince anybody about reincarnation. However, I will say, look, if it wasn't for reincarnation, how did I make it back again? One of my favorite cartoons, there's a young boy speaking with his grandfather, and his grandfather saying, I don't believe in reincarnation. And the young boy says, yeah, Grandpa, I didn't believe in reincarnation either when I was your age. Because what we do, we get confused with time. We measure time as a quantitative measure. It's really a cycle. It's a qualitative cycle of unfoldment. So if I go back to the seed and use that analogy, I can say that inside the seed of our spirit, the seed of our soul, the promise of who we are is enfolded. Remember, David Bohm talked about the enfolded universe, the implicate order of the enfolded universe. But if it's enfolded, you can't see it, you can't touch it. So you plant the seed in the fields of time and space, and it unfolds. So the whole point of the journey of the soul on earth is to unfold the enfolded. And it's interesting to note that the soul often is given a depiction of in the East as a lotus and in the West as a rose. And you can imagine, if you look at a lotus, well, where do the roots go? They go down into the mud at the bottom of a lake. They're rooted in the earth. The stem then comes up through the water, which is the emotional plane, the astral plane. And then it pokes its stem into the air, which is the higher mind, the intuitive plane, and then it reveals its full splendor. It unfolds. And the story of the jewel within the lotus in the East is the story of the unfolding of the soul. It's the soul's journey on earth. And it's said that each time that we have a particular experience, it opens another petal. And when the petals are fully opened, not only does the light of the sun strike the heart of who we are, but it touches the jewel inside the lotus, and that jewel lights up, and that jewel becomes resplendent. And it's that jewel that shines, the jewel within the lotus. So self-realization is when the light of the jewel within the lotus is radiant. So that's the story in the East. Now in the West, we talk about the rose. And we're told, for instance, in the Western mystery tradition, the Rosicrucians, who are part of this ancient tradition, their greeting was the "May the rose bloom on your cross." And we go back to that original image of light crucified in matter. So when light begins to break free of the imprisonment of matter, the rose, which is the symbol of the soul, the lighted soul, begins to bloom at the center of the cross. So the Rosicrucians, in greeting each other, "May the rose bloom on your cross," was a way of saying, may your soul flower on earth. So here we have these two images, both of them flowers, the lotus and the rose. So that's just one way of offering this. So when we're talking about cycles and seasons and tracking the journey of the soul through its earthly course, we're talking about this rhythmic unfolding of that which is enfolded, revealing the promise within. So let's take a deep breath. So what does it mean to be this timeless soul inside a time capsule? Because that's really what the personality is. It's like a time capsule. Or we're encapsulated in time, to be more correct. So let's have a look at this next image in our storybook today. So this is what we're talking about. The seed represents the eternal promise. Just as if I buy a packet of seeds, the promise of what's in the seed is usually shown on the package through a picture. If I buy carrot seeds, it will show me a picture of a carrot. Now, we've mentioned this before. Nobody has told me what's inside of me. The only way we know is to sow and grow in order to show. And so the seed of identity, the eternal promise, has to be planted in the soil of earthly experience. And then we have the movement from alpha to omega. And when you understand that I am both alpha and omega, then you realize that I am that I am. We go back to our original big picture. So this is the field of time and space. I wanted to offer this very childlike drawing because this gets very complex and technical when you read about it in some of the books. I don't want to oversimplify it, but what I would love to do is to offer a space where all of us, including myself, can touch a deeper part of who we are, why we're here, how we're here, and how we can do that together. So let's have a look at what it means to grow together with others. This next image will give us that. It's what I call the divine credibility gap. I look at myself and I'm a plant with a few leaves, and my neighbor actually is fully flowering and has got perfume coming out of it and is radiant, and I'm going, oh my God, I feel worthless and insignificant. When will I grow up to be just like my neighbor? And this is what happens inside of the personality life when we compare. Oh, I'd like to be like that person. I think I'm better than that person. I'm not as good as that person. Rather than seeking to allow the gift that is us inside of us to grow from the inside out. So the difficulty I've always found is when I meet somebody who has got their act together, as we say, there's usually one of two things happen. Either I'm inspired by them or I'm intimidated by them. So I just wanted to mention this because very often we compare ourselves to others and say, well, I'm really nothing. And we have to have self-appreciation in order to appreciate life in general. But that self-appreciation can't turn into aggrandizement of self. Look at me. And it can't go the other way and diminish ourselves and be like a shrinking violet. Every stage of unfoldment, if we can remember that we are this eternal promise unfolding in time and space, then the fact that I happen just to have a few leaves at the moment has nothing to do with my worth and my value. It simply is marking the stage of development and unfoldment in the fields of time and space. I know that's easier said than done. And the other thing about entering time and space is that sometimes it feels like a really long journey we're on. And when will it ever end? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We ask our Heavenly Father and Mother as we drive our vehicle. So let's have a look at the next So at the level of the causal, the eternal, this is where we stand in strength, stand as the sovereign soul. And yet there are times in my life, and I'm sure that there have been times in your life, where I feel like an ant crossing a vast desert. I just can't carry on. My God, I want to die. I want to give up. I can't carry on. I'm nothing. We lose hope. And when we lose hope, we become deflated. And spiritual deflation is when we have no longer the fire of spirit burning inside us. Inspiration, the breath of life inside of us. If I'm no longer inspired, I tend to feel that I've just expired. So this is a trick of time and space, is that we tend to measure ourselves over time rather than realize that we are souls unfolding in time. More correctly, in timing, because it's all about rhythm. This is not Chronos time, which I call tick-tock time. This is Kairos time, which is whatever cycle it takes for the promise to be unfolded. So let's get back to this question of it's a long way home. And sometimes I feel lost and cut off. Because thank God there is a way home. It's not just a hopeful statement by Michael. Let me show you in this next image what I believe is a real sign of hope. The cosmic seed is a living hologram. And I remember way back when the holographic plate and holographic images were first introduced into the consciousness, the public consciousness, it was if you took a holographic image on a plate of glass and shattered that glass into 100 shards, if you were to pick up any one shard, each shard contains the whole image within it, which goes back to our original issuing forth of the many from the one, feeling cut off, remembering who we are. There is a path home, because inside of us we contain the wholeness. We don't have to find our way home. We have to give birth to the wholeness that we are. That's the homecoming. The homecoming is coming into wholeness, coming into integration. So I just wanted to show this image because for me it's reassuring. Even though I may feel cut off, my life may feel broken, inside those broken pieces is still the promise and image of the holographic reality that is my essential self, my divine nature. So let's leave that image for a while. There are many ways of describing what we're here to do on earth. I talked before about the human realm, the fourth realm in nature, being this bridge between the heavenly and earthly. And it's said that through imagination, this mercurial messenger that lives inside our psyche can allow the dreams of the cosmos to enter and be realized on earth. And many of us have heard this example before, but I like it because when I go to Italy, I like to go to Florence and I like to look at the Michelangelo works. And I like to contemplate his statue of David. So how did he create David? And we're told that Michelangelo had an inspiration. He went out and he found a block of marble. And he removed from that block of marble everything that wasn't David. He revealed David. And what we're doing through our free will and through our deeper understanding, eventually we're removing from ourselves everything that is the not self, until all that remains is the radiant self. Whether it's a statue of the Virgin Mary or or David. But for me, when I go to Italy, it reminds me of the process of giving shape. So what I'd like to do now is to read you something I wrote back in 2013, which is called Shaping the Future. We shape the needed thought forms of a new world waiting to be born out of the stuff of dreams that live within the heart and mind of the planetary life. Like an artist takes the clay of earth and shapes it with skillful fingers on the turning potter's wheel to bring forth a form that is of use and of beauty, so on those deep levels of consciousness, we shape the substance of the planetary dream with the subtle hands of our collective imagination upon the turning wheel of time so that new possibilities may emerge. The form, however, is not fully complete until it has danced in the fire. The potter places the newly shaped earthenware into a kiln, and only when the right temperature and duration of the firing have been reached does the form reveal its true glazed splendor and usefulness. Likewise, it is only when the forms of our creative imagination are placed in the sacrificial fire of a higher will and purpose and tested in the crucible of daily life that the work is finished and the truth, goodness, and beauty of our labor is ultimately revealed. Life takes shape through us as we open ourselves to inspired impression, register the seed ideas held within the divine dream, and then fashion them into useful forms of living through the agency of the creative mind and the loving heart. This is our destiny as artisans, to shape and reveal the promise of a brighter future by actively participating in the ritual of continuous renewal that is the hallmark of our never-ending story of creation. So that for me sort of sums up the human being as the artisan, as the co-creator, as the shaper of planetary dreams in time and space, in matter. So why don't we take a deep breath now? I mean, we've traveled a long way. We've gone back 18 million years, at least. So let's be present for what's happening in now, because the soul right now is seeking to express itself through each one of us. And the soul of our one humanity is seeking to express itself through our common humanity. So what does it mean to live more fully as a human? And I'd like to read something else that I wrote earlier this month about what it means to move from being a human to being a gaian. Because I believe this is the next phase in the unfolding of our essential nature. So, the question, what is the difference between living as a human being and living as a gaian? As humans, we go about our lives looking at the world as an external reality, something outside of ourselves. As a gaian, we know, feel, and act within a deeply sensed knowing that the whole earth lives inside of us and we live inside the whole earth. A gaian is a conscious fractal of the multidimensional ecosystem that constitutes the living planet. A gaian is a microcosm of Gaia, a sacred space of synthesis where life meets life and knows itself to be at one with all. So to be a Gaian is really the fulfilling of the I am that I am, the path of self-realization. And when we talk about self-realization as a human being, remember, this self-realization is we're taking part in a greater unfoldment and a greater revelation of planetary light. So each time there is an aha, a light-filled awareness and self-realization within each human soul, inside the planetary life, new light is born, new awareness is born. So the soul's journey on earth, in fact, is part of the unfolding of the enfolded promise that is the soul of earth. For me, that's what it means to be a gaian. It means to understand that I am one with this beloved planet. So that's for me what it means to be a gaian. So this has been a story. We weren't sitting by the fire, but remember, the fire's living inside of us. We have the fire by friction, when we rub up against each other or rub up against things and we learn the hard way. When we bang the rocks together, bang the relationships together, and it causes sparks and fire. Then there is the solar fire that we're now beginning to learn how to harness as solar energy. And then there's the fire of spirit, which is called electrical fire. And this is the electrical fire that lives at the heart of our soul, that makes us magnetic, that allows our lives to attract the elements it needs to give of its gifts and to learn its lessons. Because how do you create a magnet? A magnet is created, as you know, you get an iron bar and you pass an electrical current through it. So when the soul is charged with electrical fire, it becomes magnetic. When the soul becomes magnetic, it calls out to its agent on earth, ourselves. And when we become responsive and responsible, able to respond, we start to dance with the soul. And the soul starts to, degree by degree, season by season, reveal more of itself until the lotus is fully opened, the rose is fully opened. However, at this time in the garden, we are attempting to allow the soul to flourish and to flower in pretty adverse conditions. So this is where we need to work together. We need to stand in community, a community of souls, a community committed to being wise stewards of Gaia, full of compassion, full of courage, all the qualities of the soul. So what I'd like to do is just to complete our journey together by reading something I wrote yesterday in preparation for this Celebration of Life event. It sort of sums up the journey we've been through in the last 55 minutes. The pageant of life. In the continuous pageant of life, through the cyclical procession of the seasons, the angel of endings always precedes the spirit of regeneration, so that truth, goodness, and beauty may be born anew and more radiantly revealed at every turn of the spiral. So the journey of the soul is a spiral journey. Sometimes we feel like we're going around in circles, like Groundhog Day. So how do you break the circle? Through an act of will, through an act of love, through an act of lifting our lives up to serve a higher purpose. When you lift the circle through applying the fire of divine purpose, the circle then turns into a spiral. And the spiral is the natural shape of evolution. It's in our DNA, it's in our bodies, it's in all things. It's in the sunflowers, it's in everything we see. So we, as souls, are on a spiral journey of flowering upon this planet. And we're here to do it together. This is a gardening club that we can join as companions. So what I'd like to do by way of finishing is just to re-enter the space of the group heart and then connect it with the heart of the one humanity that we are a part of. And through resonance, through love, allow us to come into sympathetic and empathetic resonance with the heart of Gaia. And may we be given the strength to reveal the full splendor of our soul on earth, so that Gaia, in turn, can reveal its true light and become a sacred planet within the solar family. That's the big destiny. It's useful to remember that each day when things get strung out, when we get strung out, come back to center with the affirmation, I am a soul, at one with the overlighting solar angel, seeking to express the life of the spiritual fire, the monad, through an integrated and soul-infused personality, either 3-in-1, either package. Commit to flowering together with others on earth and making this garden of Gaia a place of great beauty and a place of great peace. Thank you so much for your participation in this journey. We call it the never-ending story. It will end, but not in time. There will be a flowering, and the flowering will produce more seeds, and the seeds will then be used to sow new gardens of creation that are beyond our ken, beyond our understanding. So thank you so much for joining us here at Meditation Mount. May we walk together as one soul. May we love together as one soul. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, we can say together, we are Gaians. Thank you. Blessings from the Mount.